On today's episode of the Golden Legacy series, Elaine McGregor is joined by Paralympian Ben Quilter. Ben and Elaine discuss his sporting journey, which brought him all the way to the London 2012 Paralympic Games, where he took home a bronze medal despite competing with a serious injury. In their conversation, Ben opens up about the highs and lows of elite sport, the challenges of retirement, and how he is now bringing his experience into his new role at the British Paralympic Association. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
I'm delighted that Ben has joined us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. So I was born with full vision and diagnosed with Stargardt's disease, which is macular degeneration, at about 11 years old, 12 years old. My judo career or my judo journey had started a few years before that, at about the age of 7. So it sounds rather cliche, but if I'm perfectly honest, judo was one thing that stayed pretty consistent for me whilst life was kind of up and down, and the journey of growing up with a vision impairment kind of unfolded in front of me. But yeah, I was fortunate to have the sport that I'd already started before sort of acquiring sight loss as a bit of a constant. As I sort of navigated high school and college and university, my sight was deteriorating. But then I was fortunate enough to be representing Great Britain at visually impaired or Paralympic level from about the age of 18. And then I went to my first Paralympics at about, I think I was 26 years old.
Right.
So quite
Which
long,
one was that?
Beijing. I only missed out on Athens 4 years earlier, and then qualified for Beijing, where I finished 5th. And then I went on and was extremely fortunate to compete in a home Paralympic Games in London 2012, where I won a Paralympic bronze medal. Since then, I won plenty of other medals in between as well. In fact, I had an incredible 4 years between Beijing and London where I lost one competitive match. I was double world European champion. I'd won every other international event in that 4-year qualification period, heading into a home Paralympic Games. So it was looking rather rosy to go to London and to have an incredible tournament. Unfortunately, I picked up an injury just 6 weeks before.
Yeah, you had a very serious knee injury, didn't you?
That's
and,
right.
We all had to go quiet about it so that your competitors didn't know your weakness at that time. I remember. Can you tell us about that? How did that happen?
It was just a routine training session and just an accident, really, just a freak accident. I went to throw somebody, they went to throw me at the same time. We was going in different directions and unfortunately kind of lost balance, and he sort of ended up falling onto my knee, which meant that it folded inwards and I snapped my ACL, my anterior cruciate ligament, and my MCL, which is your medial cruciate ligament. It was hanging in the balance whether I'd compete or not. I couldn't have surgery. It was too close to the event. We decided to strap it up and give it a go. But it was, like you say, it was kept secret so that none of my competitors knew that I was injured. Fortunately, both ligaments were totally snapped, so there was no nerve supply. So there was no pain as such, other than the swelling, which stopped me from bending my knee. So yeah, to tape it up and hope that there was no further damage was considered the best option.
Do you know, it's amazing that you did that and you still came away with a bronze. I mean, you probably are very disappointed, or were at the time anyway, because you had your sights on gold, but getting bronze is a huge achievement anyway. And then to get that with that sort of injury.
To be honest, it changed quite a lot. I was ranked number 1 in the world going into any major tournament. We all, as competitors, we all look at the top competitors in the weight class and work out what they might do if you meet them, how your game plan might change or adapt. Actually, I had to completely throw everything out the window and have a complete different style or an approach on that day, given the injury.
Right.
So there's an argument where it may well, in some circumstances, gone in my favour because I didn't do anything I would normally do because my normal judo techniques and approach was no longer going to work with a significantly injured knee. It probably did have a tactical advantage, but there was obviously a huge physical disadvantage. I did win a bronze, and like you say, I was now, on reflection, I'm mega proud and pleased with the outcome. But back on the day, I wasn't quite so pleased. I remember actually standing on the podium feeling immensely disappointed, relieved, but disappointed that I hadn't won a gold. But it's part of sport, isn't it, at the end of the day? I think when you're in it, it's hard to gain perspective, but out of it, it's mega.
So I got a couple of questions there. One of them was competing in front of a home crowd. How did that feel?
It's so hard to put it into words. In my job now, which we'll come on to in a bit, I'm sure I speak a lot to aspiring Paralympians. I lead the Paralympic Inspiration Programme. I was involved in it in Rio and I led it in Paris. I'm also be leading it out in Milan Cortina next year. And they are a group of Paralympians who are looking to go to a Paralympic Games. one thing we talk about over and over again is the crowds. What's the same? What's different? Everybody, no matter how much I say, the crowds, the noise, the hype, the energy, everything at a Paralympic Games is completely different to what it is, or even at a World Championships or a smaller
Yeah.
tournament. In disability or Paralympic sport, we're not blessed with hundreds of thousands of crowds at every tournament we go to. And I just remember stepping out in London with the XL Arena packed to the rafters. I was on day one as well, so the excitement of the games was at an absolute crescendo. 9,000 people just screaming and shouting and chanting my name and stamping the floor. Like, it's making my hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Oh, you're making me feel the same.
It was so noisy. The energy was incredible.
Saying to somebody what that's going to be like until it really happens, can you?
No, it was absolutely crazy. By far one of the best experiences of my life, just to be out there and just to look around and just think, wow, almost everybody I knew and lots of people I didn't know were there to come and support. So it was
brilliant.
Phenomenal.
I'll come on to what you do now in a moment, but I just want to go back when you mentioned about beginning to lose your sight around about the age of 11, and you'd already started judo about the age of 7. Just out of interest, did you stay with the same club? How did they support you, and how did they adapt the sport for you? Because when you started, that wasn't necessarily the road of judo that you were going to go down, presumably.
No, and I'm really fortunate. I think judo as a sport lends itself really well to the visually impaired or the Paralympic equivalent, because there's not an enormous amount of difference. I think in terms of ability or performance judo, I learned a lot of the sport whilst I had vision. That's enormous. Skill acquisition for somebody who's totally blind versus someone who's got sight is a huge advantage for the sighted person. That was a huge thing for me. I think in terms of the adapting the sport, and I say this now in my role around kind of educating coaches and stuff, it's a people organization, it's a people business. In sport, we need to be able to just speak to people, find out what they need, find out what they need done differently, and then help and support. I think I was fortunate to have some really good coaches. One of my coaches was a family friend. Well, all of my coaches as a child are now family friends. But back then, they were voluntarily running judo clubs and adapting and learning on the spot, and did a fantastic job at changing whatever it was I needed. Fortunately, because my sight loss was really quite slow, there wasn't an enormous amount of adaptation required whilst I was at that age. It was as I got older that there was probably a greater need for that. Even now, when I talk to coaches and helping coaches be better at coaching visually impaired people, what one person needs is often completely different to what the other person needs. If you've coached one visually impaired person, you should never assume that the next person that you come into contact with might need the same provisions. It's just about being a good person and being able to adapt your style and your delivery like any good coach would, irrespective of visual.
I was just about to say, actually, coaches are such an influence in sport. I remember seeing Ellie Simmons being interviewed once many years ago, probably post 2012, and she just talked about how the coaching when she was a child had such a big impact on her. And I think you're absolutely right. People's vision is different, people's reaction motivations are different. A good coach is often somebody who's very open-minded but also very intuitive as to what that individual athlete needs.
Yeah, definitely. I use the example time and time again. Me and my brother got exactly the same condition, exactly the same sight loss, but have very, very different approaches to life, to learning, to how we want to be sort of spoken to or engaged with. It's about finding out or establishing that in the first instance. But you're right, sports coaches, for me, are incredibly influential, and what they do is fantastic.
You've had this fantastic and very decorated competitive judo career. What prompted your decision to retire, and at what age did you do that?
So I retired after London 2012, after my knee injury. I got married, went on honeymoon, and then came back. Then I had my knee fixed. So I had surgery on my knee, and it was a good 12 months before I was in a position where I could sort of compete again. And I was due to compete at European Championships just to see how I felt, if I wanted to carry on for the next 4 years. I saw the surgeon just before and my knee wasn't quite ready. It meant I had to withdraw from that. And that for me was a bit of a deciding factor. I just thought, do you know what? It's probably never going to be the same again. And I was 31, had just got married. We'd just had our first child, and I just felt like too much had changed. London was the absolute pinnacle. I felt like anything else might have been a bit of a disappointment. I truly believe that London was my opportunity to win a gold medal. And whilst I can sit here and say it's not all about winning medals, every performer wants to perform at their best. I was at my best. I was at the peak of my career. I knew that 4 years on from that point, I wouldn't quite be at the same level. I would still be
Yeah.
good enough, I believe, to have won a medal, but I didn't have the same level of motivation and commitment. And I knew it'd be even harder with a little one in tow. So it was at that point at 31 that I thought, this is time to do a new challenge. The other thing I think, and you may have found this with other athletes you've spoken to, like you put so much on hold to be an athlete,
Yeah.
which is a choice, and a choice that
Yeah.
I'd make time and time again. But I kind of felt like, in terms of, I was 31 and all my friends had careers and jobs and what have you, and I hadn't even started on that journey, and I was getting a little bit anxious about better get a job at some point and be a real grown up. Felt like that was the time at 31.
You have had a couple of roles in sports since then. Firstly, you've stayed in sport, which is amazing. You might want to mention a couple of the roles, but right now you are the Athlete Recruitment Network Manager. Is that correct? At the
Yeah.
British Paralympic Association? Have I said the job title right?
Absolutely spot on. It's a very wordy job title, and you managed to get it out easier than I
It's
did.
an important one.
Normally.
Yeah. So how did you transition from being a competitive athlete to where you are now at the BPA?
It was an interesting journey. It wasn't always that easy either. I'd always studied whilst competing. I had a sports science degree, and I did a master's degree in exercise physiology, which was brilliant. It gave me a different focus. It gave me a different challenge outside of training day in, day out. And that was a really useful thing to have done. However, as a visually impaired person and as a physiologist, taking urine samples and blood samples is probably not the most ideal career path. I kind of wish I'd thought about that beforehand, but it helped me understand myself and my performance, and it has put me in a great position. I chose to step away from physiology, which was my master's degree, and I went into disability sports development in the first instance. I was working in and around London in disability sport development, but then really missed high performance sport. And at the same time, I'd spent 12 months, maybe 18 months to 2 years, kind of in a bit of a bad patch with kind of my identity and who I was now after being an athlete. And I don't think London helped that, if I'm honest, because the hype surrounding London was enormous. You go from this kind of mini celebrity in a home game to kind of, oh, I'm just a disabled person trying to navigate my way through life. And that was a challenge. I then took some of that and I thought, well, performance lifestyle seems like a really good place for me to be. And I had a few interviews and struggled to get into the role, but I ended up landing myself a role, a maternity cover role with para triathlon, and para canoe.
I remember.
Yeah, as a performance lifestyle advisor. And that was fantastic. I did that for 9 months. And then a role came up in British cycling, British swimming, to working with their para squads. So I moved to Manchester and did that. And there was a few changes within that. I ended up cycling full time. But I did that role, I was up in Manchester for about 5 years, 4.5, 5 years before getting this job at ParalympicsGB, which, yeah, it is, like you say, it's around athlete recruitment and development. It's a really important role, making sure that we're connecting the dots, working with organisations like yourselves at BBS and the Home Nations and the NGBs and the plethora of people that are all working to engage disabled people in sport and physical activity, and helping people to decide if performance sports for them. If it is, making sure they've got the right opportunities and access to sports. So much to do, but so much that I'm passionate about. I know you're passionate about, and there's loads and loads of passionate people trying to do the same thing. It's a great job to be in, trying to work with everyone and navigate that space and facilitate people into sport.
I love the passion of the people that, like yourselves, people that really want to influence and change sport for disabled people. And that passion never dies down. It never tempers back. It's always there. People like yourself, you're now really, so you've walked the walk because you've been an athlete. So you're in a fantastic position to be able to influence athletes of the future, to provide guidance, support, and encouragement. It must feel really good to you that you're able to do that after that period of feeling like you didn't have an identity.
It definitely does. And yeah, do you know what, actually saying that's triggered a thought in my mind. I was back home a few months ago down in Brighton, and I visited Brighton Table Tennis Club, which happens to be in the building next door to where I started my judo journey as a 7-year-old boy. And the guy down there running that club is hugely inspiring. I thought to myself at that point, I now work at a more strategic, like, management level.
Yeah.
And every now and then when we do an event, I come away absolutely buzzing, thinking this is what it's all about, seeing people, getting people involved in sport. And you must feel the same, Elaine.
Oh, 100%.
Most of my day is spent sending emails and meetings and whatever, and facilitating the stuff behind the scenes, but actually seeing it happening and watching people get what sport is I kind of was missing that. So I made the silly decision to start a judo club, which I've been doing for about 8 weeks now, which I don't have time to shoehorn running a judo club into my life, but I've done it because it's really important to me. So yeah, now I get to do it week in, week out at my judo club, and my kids go to the club and I run it with my wife. But then also my day job of trying to facilitate people into performance pathways and help people find that next layer or level of sport is really good. I really enjoy it.
With that and the role that you play, and it's not just the role you play, like you said earlier, you work with lots of different people, lots of different organisations, as we are sort of collectively trying to shape disability sport, both at a grassroots but right through to performance. How do you see the landscape of disability sport evolving over the next few years?
Oh, well, I think it's always been an industry packed full of, like you say, really passionate, engaged people. I'd like to think that that bit won't change. That bit will
Yeah.
always have people on the ground doing sport for the sake of sport, and anyone with a disability or even without a disability finds sport, finds some meaning in it, and hopefully gets some really positive outcomes and benefits from that.
Yeah.
I hope, without being too negative, I hope that some of the external factors that we see nowadays, like social media and computers
Yeah.
and technology, don't have too much of a negative effect on sport and physical activity. Inevitably, I think they may do, but for me, that's even more reason to make sure that sport and sport offerings are present and evolving, and we as an industry stay on the front foot and keep enforcing the benefits of sport and why it's required, why it's needed. Obviously, the technology does make it slightly easier because we can share the word of what's happening where, and there'll be other things that are evolving that you and I won't even know how to predict at the moment because we're probably not tech savvy enough. But there's loads going on. I just hope that as it evolves more in a more positive way, because I do see lots of people probably less active due to other
Factors.
other distractions, other options. I think when I was growing up, there was only so much channels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that you could watch, and so parents were super keen to have you doing all sorts of different sport and activity. I think, and I just see my children now, they've every single film, every single Disney film, every single TV program literally at their fingertips on a tablet at any one time. So there are definitely other things that could be consuming time rather than sport.
I think the other thing is for disability sport, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this. We're going through an economic crisis, and one of the things that people sort of try and save money on is if they go to a gym or if they go to a local sports club, they might just say, I've got to pull back a little bit here. But actually, that has such an impact on your mental health that if you can't afford to go to a gym or you can't afford to go to your local judo club or whatever, get out and walk, get out and get the fresh air. Just keep that, because that balance between mental well-being and physical activity is so key. And I think, if anything, in terms of the landscape of sport as a whole, not just disability sport, I think post-COVID, we're learning that more and more, aren't we?
Yeah, you're right. And running a judo club for me has made me realise that hall hire is not cheap. The cost of running a club means those costs need to be passed on in order to pay to actually do it in the first place. Not to mention that the giving up your time free, it's harder and harder and harder nowadays to run sport, to run physical activity, often for the right reasons. The checks and what have you, and courses and qualifications required to do it are much better now. But there are plenty of barriers. It takes a very committed person to do it. And like you say, the cost of all of those things is also increasing. It'd be good to see some shifts and some of those barriers being removed to enable more people to access more sport. And as we know, disabled people are already facing some barriers and challenges to physical activity in sport. Doing something, whatever it might be, I think the social interaction is enormous. When I think of my friend groups or my wedding, it was full of people that I met doing sport.
And talking about sport and connections, you've actually engaged with BBS over the years. Do you have any particular highlights of your times with BBS, or anything that you think that as an organisation we've been doing that's great or could be doing even further down the road more of? Is there anything, as we're looking in our 50th anniversary year, what are your sort of hopes for the organisation, and do you have any memories to share?
I'd say more recently, definitely the collaboration and the partnership we've worked on at BBS. You guys have been incredibly supportive for the work that I've been trying to do in terms of athlete recruitment and the opportunities that we're trying to pass on to anyone with a vision impairment, but not only a vision impairment, but my role is pan disability. I think the openness, the engagement, the willingness to trust and support and grow initiatives and get more people involved is phenomenal. The event that I attended, I think had I started the role? I'm not sure if I had. I might have been very early doors in my role now, but the IBSA event in Birmingham,
IBSA World Games.
IBSA World Games,
2023, that's right.
Yeah, that's etched in your mind, isn't it, Elaine? You're not going to forget
Oh,
that.
yes.
I started in my role in May 2023, so yeah, it must have overlapped. That was a highlight for me, and I know that post-COVID, it was a real struggle for yourselves and the organisation to run a big event and get engagement and people involved. But that for me, that was brilliant, and I'd hate to wish it upon you again. But more events like that in this country, I think, would be phenomenal. I'm a big believer, and I've said it to you time and time again, without grassroots and participation, broadening that base at the bottom of the pyramid, performance just doesn't exist. Seeing the work that you do, how you engage people in the first instance, how you get people just being confident to go to a local club or a local organisation, that confidence grows and grows and grows and shapes people and develops people. I think every person involved in the organisation, every person delivering their local sports or their local cricket field, whatever it might be, who's linking in with yourselves, who's linking in with other organisations, all pulling in the same direction. And I think those things are the bits that really stand out for me. The IBSA World Games was a highlight, and having competed in a number of them myself, it was remarkable to see it in England and the job that you guys did on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up now. So just a couple of things. Firstly, we talked about those barriers to participation. Just before that, we talked about the passion, and that passion is unwavering. We will charge through those barriers, won't we? As it is our 50th anniversary, is there any message that you'd like to share with BBS members or people thinking about taking up sport who are living with sight loss?
I think I feel fortunate that my sight loss happened gradually, slowly as I got older. There were obviously some real negatives to that. But for me, I was lucky. Life was easier for me learning to live with sight loss than being born with sight loss. But there are people out there are organisations out there are passionate people and passionate charities, organisations set up to support and help you get what you need to do. One will lead to the next, which will lead to the next, which will lead to the next. I would encourage everyone to challenge themselves and push the boundaries and take yourself outside of your comfort zone in order to see where you can go, to end up somewhere that you might not know it exists. Because, my life is changed incredibly for the better, for the sake of sport and for where I ended up and what I did. Now, that doesn't always need to be a performance journey. And I meet people that are in their 50s, still physically active. And my message to them is always, look, for every visually impaired child that sees you in a mainstream club or you in a club taking part in sport, that is inspirational. We need to normalise the fact that people with visual impairments do take part in sport. They do interact in society. There is an avenue and a space and something for someone everywhere. Always take that leap, put yourself in a position that may not feel particularly comfortable and challenge yourself to see where you go. Sport for me it definitely changed my life, improved it massively.
That is a lovely note to end on. Ben, we are so proud of you. We're proud of the relationship that we have with you at British Blind Sport. You've always been an unwavering supporter of our work. And every time I have a phone call with you or an email, I can almost feel the excitement of, should we do this? Can we look at this? And you've always got that open mind. So I want to thank you for not just today, but for the great that we do. And let's keep going in that direction, breaking down barriers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Golden Legacy series with Ben Quilter. If you did, please subscribe, leave a review or share it with your family and friends. To find out more about the work of British Blind Sport, visit britishblindsport.org.uk.